Today we're talking about a group of session musicians that became a quirky yet genius 70s art rock band. They had great success with their singles like I'm Not in Love and Dreadlock Holiday. We're talking about the history and discography of 10cc. 10cc originally consisted of 4 English musicians who all wrote songs, sang lead and backing vocals, and all played multiple instruments except for Kevin Godley, who did drums and different kinds of percussion instruments. Graham Gouldman was on bass but would also contribute guitar at times, and Eric Stewart and Lol Creme would both play guitar, piano, and keyboards. Graham Gouldman was born May 10th, 1946, and he performed with many bands in the mid-60s that also involved his later 10cc bandmates. His first recording was of a song written by Lol Creme while he was in the Whirlwinds. From 64 to 66, he was in a band called the Mockingbirds with Kevin Godley, and was there for the demise of Eric Stewart's band, the Mindbenders. In the 60s, Graham Gouldman was never able to score a hit with any of the bands that he was a part of, but he became an extremely successful songwriter for multiple companies throughout the years. He wrote huge hits for bands like the Yardbirds, the Hollies, and Herman's Hermits, and released his own solo album in the year 1968, which included new versions of some of those songs. He called the album The Graham Gouldman Thing. Eric Stewart was born January 20th, 1945, and he had been in a couple of bands before, but in early 1963, he was in the right place and the right time when he performed as a sit-in at an audition in which Wayne Fontana got a record deal, and the company wanted him to use the same backing band for the future. This rhythm and blues band changed its name to Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders, and they released 2 albums in 1965 before Fontana left the group and Eric Stewart took over on vocals for the next 2 albums. The first single with Eric on lead vocals under the name The Mindbenders was a #1 hit. Graham joined the band on bass in March of '68, and the band started wanting to create music that was more advanced than what the Mindbenders were originally known for, and after a string of bad gigs, Eric declared the band finished in November of that year. At this time, Eric Stewart had been recording demos at Inner City Studios, where he soon became a partner with the owner, Peter Tattersall, so that he could more hone in his abilities as a producer. The 2 of them would renovate a building into what would become the legendary Strawberry Studios. Kevin Godley was born October 7th, 1945, and while attending art college in Manchester, he met Lol Creme, the youngest of the group, born September 19th, 1947. These 2 would become great friends and collaborate in many experimental and creative ways throughout the years, but their first joining of significance was in the rhythm and blues band The Sabres. After Godley's experience with the Mockingbirds, Godley and Creme would reunite in 1967 and release a single under the name The Yellow Bellow Room Boom. In 1969, Graham Gouldman was writing music for Marmalade Records and would use Strawberry Studios to record his demos. He helped Godley and Creme get a deal with Marmalade Records, and in September they started recording at Strawberry Studios. So Eric and Graham both contributed to their next single, which was released under the name Frab Joy and the Runcible Spoon. Hopefully you're already starting to get an idea of how silly and out there Godley and Creme are. These guys are just a hoot, and I can't explain everything about how fun they are in this video. For the next few years, all 4 gentlemen worked as session musicians for whatever act came through the doors, and Graham was also having writing contracts with a group called Super K Productions. Super K Productions requested that he write easy bubblegum hits that could be recorded by any band, but eventually Graham convinced the group that him and his friends at Strawberry Studios could do basically all the work themselves, and they wouldn't need to hire any other musicians. Super K Productions paid for 3 months of studio time in which all 4 members of the band would write songs, and everybody would record on everything, but then the company would release it under different band titles, and release it all over the world in different ways, and sometimes it was flops, sometimes minor hits, and even the band themselves probably doesn't know how many of these singles or what different variations they are. Kind of a weird happening. The best thing that came out of this was that the studio was able to make some major upgrades. After that, Graham went to New York to continue to write for Super K Productions, and the other 3, while playing around in the studio with some of their new gear, ended up creating a track called Neanderthal Man, which was just an experiment, but somebody thought it was really interesting, told them maybe polish it up and release it as a single, and so they did, and it ended up reaching number 2 on the UK charts and was a hit around the world. That song was released under the name Hot Legs, and the following single was released under the name Dr. Father, but it was less successful, so they went back to the name Hot Legs for their studio album Thinks, School Stinks, released in 1971. The album has a lot of variety, and we hear folk, pop, rhythm and blues, rock and roll songs. Some of the tracks are really wonderful for one reason or another, but overall the album should only be recommended to big fans of 10cc. Graham Gouldman came back and joined the band on bass for a short tour backing the Moody Blues. Then they headed back into the studio to record a single that didn't chart. The band continued to do session work at Strawberry and produced and recorded on the entirety of 2 Neil Sedaka albums. Solitaire, released in 1972, and The Tra-La Days Are Over in 1973. It was after Solitaire that the band decided that if they were going to go through all of that work to make a full pop album, they may as well be getting paid more than just their session work time. It was time to really step up producing their own songs and make a name for themselves under their own name. The first couple of singles they attempted were unsuccessful, and one of them was rejected by Apple for not being commercial enough. The selected B-side for that single was the Zappa-inspired doo-wop spoof, Donna, which the band pitched to Jonathan King, whom Eric had known for several years at this point. King loved it, signed them to UK Records, and declared that Donna was going to be a hit. He told the band about a dream he'd had about a band that was going to be the best in the world, and they were called 10cc, and thus he gave them the name. As King predicted, Donna was a hit, and the band released several more singles to varied levels of success before releasing their first full-length debut album, 10cc, in July of 1973. This lovely, full introduction to the band is packed full of catchy and fun pop songs that show a lot of their sarcastic and playful personalities. It's clear when listening to this album that these guys are so incredibly experienced in all types of music. They incorporate elements of many styles in order to create fresh music that is timeless and super interesting. The band's production skills and the usage of all 4 voices in different combinations made them instantly stand out. The band basically consisted of 2 different songwriting teams. The artistic and creative Godley and Creme would come up with crazy musical ideas, and Eric and Graham were both incredibly experienced at crafting pop songs. They would often split up and write in 2 different rooms, and then get back together and contribute to each other's pieces. One song would often have multiple lead vocalists switching off, or maybe sections where 2 guys sing together with background vocals of the other guys. Tons of different combinations of voices here. They say they would basically do an audition process within the studio in which they would see whose voice sounds best in what combination over a certain piece of music. The group would release their second album, Sheet Music, in May of 1974, and it was a major breakthrough. The album stayed on the UK charts for 6 months, and the band was able to do a small US tour in early 1974. Sheet Music is a huge step up in my opinion, and is a near flawless album that keeps you on your toes in so many ways. You don't want to miss a note or a lyric. It's all way too fun and perfected to a T. The band still incorporates callbacks to other genres, but to this day it sounds like pure creativity from start to finish. The most well-known songs from this album are The Wall Street Shuffle and The Worst Band in the World. Though if you aren't going to listen to the entire album, I also recommend songs like Silly Love or Clockwork Creep, to really show off some more of their craziness. Another really good one is the almost 7-minute long progressive song, Somewhere in Hollywood. Here's a clip of my mates and I doing the Wall Street Shuffle. How are you? Did your money make you better? Are you waiting for the hour when you can screw me? 'Cause you're big enough to do the Wall Street Shuffle and your money hustle. Again, I just love this album from beginning to end. Unfortunately, the band wasn't making any money with Jonathan King, so the band decided to look for a new label to work with. Word got out that the band was on the market, and tons of labels were throwing offers at them. They eventually decided to partner with Virgin Records, but then they were going to go out of town at the time that they were supposed to be signing the contract. So they gave their management power of attorney, but when they came back from vacation, they found that they actually got signed to a different label against their will. The management saw dollar signs elsewhere and betrayed the deal with Virgin, signing them to Mercury for the next few albums instead. At least a couple of the band members to this day are still disgusted by this. 10cc's third album, the original soundtrack from March 1975, continues to improve on 10cc's interesting ideas on how to push pop music. It starts off with an almost 9-minute long operetta called One Night in Paris, and after that we hear this lineup's most notable and well-known song, I'm Not in Love. To save a song that felt like it was missing something, they experimented by recording 3 of the band members individually recording an ah on an almost 2-octave scale, each of them recording each note 16 times. Then they had their sliders to fade them all in and out with all these different layers of their voices, and were able to bring them in and out to make chords and melodies using all of the ahs simultaneously or in whatever combination they wanted to. The unique sound that this created and the song's emotional lyrics propelled the song to #1 in multiple countries and at least top 10 in several more. Another fun and silly song that you simply just don't want to miss from this song is Life is a Minestrone. The band's final album with the classic lineup is How Dare You from January 1976. It continues to progress even further into their unique brand of humorous and progressive artistic pop rock. The band has so many change-ups and interesting sounds that it can be hard to wrap your head around everything that's going on in a first listen. The production on this album really pushes the bar. Everything sounds so incredible, of course, but as they always have, the band uses the studio to their advantage in so many ways that in this album's case, there are moments that they wouldn't really be able to replicate live without a recording or a 10-piece lineup to back them. My favorite track is a great example of this. The over 6-minute long Don't Hang Up incorporates sound effects, instrumentation that I can't really explain all the time, sounds bouncing between headphones, and a couple of sharp style changes. Not to mention the incredibly entertaining lyrics about a divorce. The 3 excellent singles from this album are Art for Art's Sake, I'm Mandy, Fly Me, and Lazy Ways. Back in '69, Godley and Creme invented what they called the Gizmotron, which was a device that would attach to your electric guitar, and it would vibrate the strings, either individual strings or multiple strings, so that way they could create violin-type sounds and try to replicate other instruments and cut back on studio costs. After How Dare You, Godley and Creme experimented with just how far they could push the Gizmotron, and started crafting what would end up becoming a 3-disc concept album called Consequences. When they heard the pop music that Stewart and Gouldman were crafting next door, they expressed their exhaustion with such ideas and professionally parted ways from their longtime collaborators. In the future, I plan to do another video specifically on Godley and Creme and their future endeavors with music videos, experimental music, and trying to market the Gizmotron. So please subscribe to hear what happened next with Godley and Creme. Longtime backup drummer and keyboardist Paul Burgess was asked to join the band as Eric and Graham were enjoying the process of crafting new music without the spontaneity and craziness of Godley and Creme in the studio. But they took a lot of inspiration from their old collaborators, and if you weren't a well-versed fan of 10cc, you might not even notice the absence of Godley and Creme when you listen to their 5th album, Deceptive Bends. Released in May of 1977, Deceptive Bends spawned 2 hits, Good Morning Judge, and of course, The Things We Do for Love. Because of this success, the band went on to tour with some new band members and recorded a live album in June of 1977. Guitarist Rick Fenn, a second drummer Stewart Tosh, and new keyboardist Duncan McKay joined the band officially for the next studio album, Bloody Tourists, released in September of 1978. The reggae-styled lead single off of this album, Dreadlock Holiday, was a huge hit that made it to #1 on charts worldwide and has since been sampled and covered by many different bands. I had worked out what to say for the whole history of this band, but really at this point, it's a lot less interesting, and so is the music, unfortunately. Though they do still have a lot of good songs here and there, I feel like a lot of what Stewart and Gouldman release as 10cc after this point are kind of just trying to relive the past, trying to relive a reggae hit again, and I'm just not super into it. It's fine if you are totally into it. If you want me to do a 10cc 2, I can do that. But really, the main points are that in the early 90s, the record label contrived a reunion album to try to get sales, but it was really just a mere glimpse of Godley and Creme on an album totally created by Eric and Graham, as well as a new producer that didn't really understand 10cc, and the whole thing is just a flop. Then in 2006, Godley and Gouldman get together for a project they called GG06, in which they have a fun song that kind of talks about the beginning days of 10cc. Eric eventually leaves the band, and Gouldman created a touring version of the band that still tours to date. If you're looking for where to start with this band, the first album is a great place to start, but it doesn't really reach the heights of the next few albums. Sheet Music, the original soundtrack, and How Dare You are all incredible classics that I'm going to be spinning until I die. If you just want a few songs to check out, I always leave links in my description below for some of the singles or whatever else I find interesting about a band, and I release videos like this weekly, so subscribe so you don't miss out on something that could become one of your favorite bands ever. Comment down below telling me your favorite music by 10cc and how you heard of the band. Have a great listening session.